Let's combat and fight back with maltracks. The war of the minds, they want control of the masses. And Common Core, they dumb us down in the classes. Without knowledge, we can't gain access. Build with the elders, take notes and write classes. We keep whining on the block, how it's gonna stop? Let's start supporting our own, make their supply drop. We buy stocks, then we buy blocks. Cause we know the truth and we tuned in to Dr. Maat.
Bibi Tumi, Bibi Fahodiye, peace to all of my thinkers, truth speakers, and truth seekers. Welcome to another Truth to Power Talk with your sister, Dr. Maat. Thank you for joining another powerful discussion. And tonight I have with me another powerful guest, Dr. Professor Hunter Adams. How are you doing tonight, Dr. Adams?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so very much for inviting me to share a little bit with your viewers and listeners wherever in the world they may be. So thank you very much, Dr. Maat.
And thank you, Dr. Adams, for coming on the platform. I know you're a very, very busy person, and you and I were trying to coordinate this talk for like over a year.
Right.
Exactly. And so, you were busy, I was busy. And so, I give thanks that our schedules were able to mesh so that we could have this dialogue tonight. Family, take a moment out to thumb up this video. If you're watching on YouTube, thumb up this video. You know how the algorithm works. The more you thumb up the video, then you'll start seeing my stuff on your feed, and it'll appear on the feed. Okay, share this video. Sharing is caring. And tonight, Dr. Adams and I are going to be dropping a lot of information, and we want to get this information out to the people. So if you're watching on Facebook or you're watching on YouTube, be sure to share this video. Also, family, if you're watching on YouTube and you haven't subscribed to my channel, or you're watching on another social media platform and you haven't subscribed to my channel, be sure to head on over to YouTube, type in Dr. Oya Maat, and click subscribe and hit the notification bell so that anytime I'm live, you receive an alert. Also, family, if you've missed any of the discussions that I've had, I've created a Truth to Power Talk playlist on my channel. And so you can go right into that playlist, go into the archives and check out my previous discussions. And I brought on our greats, Professor James Small, Dr. Kaba Kamene, Dr. Malefe Asante, Dr. Wade Nobles, Dr. Darity, Baba Mwalimu Barudi. I brought on the great Sister Shahrazad Ali. So it's a bunch of people that have come on the platform, and they've dropped a lot of good information. Also, family, join me here every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Read Book Club. Tomorrow, we will be meeting at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time right here to discuss Chapter 7 of our book, The Color of Money. And it's a very, very powerful book. And so if you don't have the book, and even if you haven't read, the chapter, please show up, because I'm telling you, you're going to learn some good stuff. You're going to learn some good stuff just listening, to the dialogue. So anyway, Dr. Adams, let me pull up your bio. Let me pull up your bio. And actually, before I do that, it's some new folks to the platform. And so when you hear me at the beginning say Bibi Tumi, I'm saying Black Power. When you hear me say Bibi Fahodiye, I'm saying African liberation. So I just want to make sure, family, for my newbies, that you know what you're hearing, with the definition of the terms that I'm utilizing at the beginning of my show during my greeting. All right, so narrative bio of Dr. Hunter Havlin Adams III. Dr. Adams is a Chicago native, has been passionately at the forefront of the campaign for lifting the brain fog of racism's invisible violence and curricular cultural decolonization. Ashe. In 1988, before the New York Times 1619 Project, the Portland, Oregon Public Schools commissioned him to join their Curriculum of Inclusion project, the brainchild of the educational psychologist Dr. Asa Hilliard. It was designed for kindergarten to 11th grade educators to infuse new content omitted from the curriculum about African American culture and achievements before, during, and beyond enslavement, to tell a truthful narrative and to bolster Black children's self-esteem. Dr. Hunter's work, one of 6 supplemental baseline essays, was entitled African and African American contributions to science and technology, Ashe. His thesis altered the arc of science history and garnered the attention of the Wall Street Journal in 1991, Washington Post in 1992, and other media. Hunter became a co-developer with Yale University Dr. James Comer in the National Urban League of a $7 million science and mathematics enrichment and proficiency program named Say Yes to a Youngster's Future. He is also a science and history consultant to Chicago's Field Museum of National History's permanent exhibit on Africa in Illinois Transatlantic Slave Commission in Detroit and Chicago Public Schools interdisciplinary African American curriculum program. He pursued his graduate studies in neuroscience at the University College of London's Institute of Psychiatry. He received his Bachelor of Science degree and he graduated cum laude, Ashe, from Chicago State University with a neuroscience emphasis. And he has earned certificates in biophotonics, biophysics, and the International Institute of Biophysics, Neuss, Germany, and medical ethics from the University of London Imperial College. All right. And it says right here that he boldly addresses racialized oppression in his forthcoming widely anticipated book. And we're going to be talking about that tonight. We Were Never Slaves, Seeing Through the Brain Fog of Invisible Violence, which will be published in the winter of 2022. He is the father of 3 amazing children with successful careers and enjoys art, movies, and music. And so without further ado, again, Dr. Hunter, thank you so much for being with us today. And when I read your bio, I thought about myself because, you know, I'm a STEM person. And when you and I met, when you came to Baltimore for Dr. Newton's, her 40-day ascension ceremony, you and I connected. You said, oh, you're an engineer. Oh, yeah, I'm a neuroscientist. And we had that connection. And we also share a connection for history, our passion for history, our passion for STEM, and our passion to teach our children, to teach our babies about our history prior to the Ma'afa, and to also utilize STEM to build their confidence, character, and capability. And so we share those commonalities. And I thought about that, Doc, when I just looked at your bio. I said, this is why he and I connected, you know, so tight, you know, in Baltimore. We connected heavy in Baltimore. And so anyway, family, tonight we're talking about We Were Never Slaves and some other stuff. But let me ask you a question, Doc. This is my first question before we jump into We Were Never Slaves. And it does go with the topic. Mm-hmm. There's this debate going on online. And you have people saying, you know, well, we should not reconnect with the Africans on the continent because they sold us into slavery. Africans sold Africans into slavery. And so there's this, you know, this idea, Africans sold other Africans into slavery, and people started attacking Queen Nzinga, saying that she participated in the slave trade. She gave up, I forgot how many Africans she sold to the Dutch. But, you know, people bring that up and they're saying she sold her own people into slavery. So I asked you, Dr. Adams, did Africans sell other Africans into slavery? Did we just give up our people? You know, did we sell our own people into slavery?
That is a profound question, and I hear it a lot of times. And let me answer it by giving you 3 points for discussion, which you can share with anyone who brings that up. Mm-hmm. Number 1, the idea of Africa is an invention. That's number 1. Africa did not exist as a continental geographical body prior to the 18th century. The people who were captured, who were engaged by the Europeans, did not call themselves Africans. They called themselves by their ethnic name, right? So Africans did not sell other Africans to Europeans or Arabs. We have to get that straight, because they weren't Africans in the first place. They were their own particular ethnic groups, whether it's Ashanti, Akan, Yoruba, Fulani, Berber, no matter who they were their own individual groups. Number two, there was a thing that Arabs developed called ransom captivity, where they would capture or make deals with local leaders for their war criminals, undesirables, and so forth. And so they would take them. And then if the families wanted them back, then they had to pay a ransom. And so this began with the Arabs. The Europeans extended that whole idea of ransom captivity. And we look at early documents from the Portuguese in particular, who kicked the whole thing off, the whole international human trafficking enterprise. I do not use the word slave trade because it was a human trafficking enterprise.
Come on, call it what it is.
People from their local environments. It was not a slave trade because there were no slaves. You had human beings who were captured. And so the Europeans ransom. In fact, the Portuguese use a term, I can't think of the exact Portuguese term, but ransom captives. They held them for ransom to whoever could pay. And so they end up taking them at first to Portugal, right? And so wealthy Portugal elites paid the ransom, and that's how you got Africans, captive Africans in Portugal, and they were turned trafficked to other European countries. Then later, the whole notion of ransom, they said, hey, this is a hell of a thing here we got. And then I talk about in the book why Pope Nicholas V issued his papal bulls authorizing a just war against the enemies of Christ. Dr. Maat, who were the enemies of Christ? Muslims,
Saracens, Africans, absolutely. Right. That's what they call them.
Right. They were enemies of Christ, and therefore, he made a deal with the King of Portugal, right? Because he had some other ideas of what he wanted to do with the money, which I'm not going to talk about here. I talk about in the book. And it's absolutely astounding when you see what his motivations were for doing this deal with the King of Portugal, Alfonso V, right? Friends with Henry the Navigator or the Instigator. But the point I'm trying to drive home is that Africans did not sell other Africans into bondage. You had individual ethnic groups, the leadership of individual ethnic groups, for whatever the reason it might have been. It might have been to get some military advantage over their competing ethnic groups, their rivals. There's lots of work written on this. I'm not the person who's written on this. I've just uncovered and I'm presenting it to your audience this evening. But the point is, that's one of the reasons why the Africans who remained behind, those left behind, they didn't know where to go to find their kin. They didn't know where they were. They couldn't identify them. And so they didn't hijack. There's no evidence of them hijacking a European vessel to trace the pathway to North and South America to find their ancestors, because they didn't know where to go. And when someone says, well, send them back to Africa, send them back to who? What ethnic group are you from? How are you going to find your village where you were from, where your people are at? And so we have to dispense of the notion of Africans sold other Africans into slavery. But let's say, even if that was true, their systems of bondage, conscripted labor, right, was drastically different from what we've experienced on this side of the Atlantic. We're talking about an institutionalized, industrialized, corporatized system of wealth extraction of the labor, creativity, spirituality, and everything from a people. That system never existed before in human history, not even in Rome, right? Not even in Greece. It didn't exist then. We're talking about a corporate, institutionalized system. And so when you go to your Webster's Dictionary or Collegiate Dictionary or Black's Law Dictionary and look up the definition of slave, you do not see the word, Dr. Maat, institution. They want to make it like it was an individual thing. No, this was an institutionalized international institution, system. And so there was nothing on the continent like that, because even amongst the various ethnic groups who traded with one another, they had trading coalitions. They didn't have this level of exploitation as a system. It didn't exist. And so we have to be very careful of conflating what we know about human trafficking and captivity. You know, plantations, those weren't plantations, those were open air prison camps.
Come on.
In prison.
Come on, teach, Dr. Hunter.
They were in prison. We got to change the language to change the game. Michael Jackson told us that in his song, We Can't Win. We can't win with their story. We need our own story. We got to get the story straight, as Dr. King said the night before he was assassinated. I'm here tonight to get the language straight. Black is all evil and ugly, and white is angelic and innocent and beautiful. And it's not true. You know, the title of my book, We Were Never Slaves. If you want to end racism, the first thing, African descendant people, wherever they may be, they have to let go of the brand of bondage. Slave. We were not that. We are not Eastern European Slavic people. Dr. Maat, watch this. I have a Bulgarian Facebook friend, right? And she wrote an incredible article where she talks about how Slavic people were the third tier people in Europe. The reason why the word Slav became slave is because, not what I say, there's a whole bunch of scholarship on this, is because they worked the plantations in Crete and Cyprus, the sugar plantations. They were treated like we were here in North and South America. The Slavs were. I had an experience, Dr. Maat, of meeting, thanks to my dearly beloved friend, Nana Dr. Patricia Newton, of meeting the ambassador, rather the consulate to the Czech Republic. She said, hey, Hunter, you know, she was here for what's called the Motivation Show. It's a trade show to get people from the travel industry to come together so they can, you know, so countries can present their country as the destination to hold a conference. Hotels can present their property as the place where you want to have your conference and so forth. She said, hey, Hunter, you and an attorney friend, you want to hang out with me over at the Czech consulate's invitation only party? I said, yes, right? Yes. Held at the Spertus College of Judaica across from Millennium Park in downtown Chicago, a beautiful facility, right? And so Mayor Harold Washington, one of the things that he's known for, which most people don't know him for, is the whole expansion of the Sister City program, right? So Accra, Ghana is a sister city of Chicago, as is Prague, Czech Republic is a sister city of Chicago, right? So I went up to, and this is in the introduction to the book. So I went up to, after the Consul General spoke welcomed everyone. I went up to him and I talked to him, and I told him, my name is Hunter Adams, so forth. I'm president of a small foundation, the Royal Circle Foundation. One of our officers is over there at the table. And, so he said, yes, thank you. I said, and I told him I'm very enthusiastic about your new president. His name is Václav Havel, right? He came, this is in 2009. And so he came into office the same time as Barack Hussein Obama did. And so I told him, I said, I'm really enthusiastic about the president of a country who's a playwright, a poet, an actor, and a president, and talks about the notion of transcendence, of spirituality, right? I've never heard that from a president. He said, you know about him? I said, well, I've read many of his works. And so his name was Consul General Merrick. He says, do you know Queen Latifah? And I said, what? I said, I don't know her personally. I loved her movie Last Holiday with LL Cool J. He said, it was filmed at the Hotel Grand Pup outside of Prague. He said, I want to invite you to have your next meeting there at Prague. I said, well, thank you very much. I said, well, Your Honor, I have a question I would like to ask you. He said, sure. I said, can you help me out? This has been something that's been on my mind for a long time. It's how did the name for a people, Slav, become the brand for a bondage slave? He turned red, Dr. Maat. He said, we don't talk about that. And Dr. Newton looked at me and looked at him, said, what did Hunter say to him? And so I put on my journalist hat and I rephrased the question and I asked him again. He said, we don't talk about that. Now he's annoyed. He said, but I tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite you to the 20-year commemoration of the Velvet Revolution. That's when the Czech Republic broke away from the Soviet Union, now Russia. And there'll be someone there who can answer the question for you, right? So the following year in 2010, I get the invitation to come downtown Chicago off the point where Jean-Baptiste du Sable and his wife set up the first permanent settlement that became Chicago. Went up to the room. I had to be like the Invisible Man because I was the only person of African descent in the room. And so folks, they weren't hostile. They just looked at me and said, wow, who are you? Why are you here? I said, well, I got an invitation from the Consul General to come. Anyway, so the keynote speaker was a guy who was the dean of the graduate school at Northwestern, written like 10 or 15 books on Slavic history and language. So I went up to him, had some lighthearted conversation, and then I asked him the same question. Guess what he said?
I was waiting. I said, I was curious.
We don't talk about that. And then he turned his back on me and scurried away. He dissed me. I said, wow. But then something, as Sun Ra would say, fate was in a pleasant mood because there was a guy standing next to me who was eavesdropping in on our conversation. I didn't say anything offensive. He said, I didn't think. And he said, that was my dad and you upset him. I said, what? I said, how did I upset him? By asking him a question. He said, it brought up memories of the Timno. I said, sir, I don't know what the Timno is, and I apologize if I upset your father. He said, the Timno is the darkness, it's the blackness. I said, I still don't know what you're talking about. He said, well, come with me to the conference room and we can have a traditional Czech dinner check beer and have conversation, and I'll break it down for you.
Okay.
And so I'm going to stop there. But the point was, after he got through breaking things down, he told me the nuances of Czech history and how they were plundered, how they were white. You think what's happening in Ukraine was bad? It compares nothing to what happened to them.
Mm.
And so the point of all of this is that we're called slaves because we share a common experience with Slavic people of what other Europeans, the Germans, the Turks, the Vikings, did to them.
Mm. Mm. So that's where the name came from.
Slave comes from Slav. There was a play in Toronto called Slav, but they put the diacritical mark over the A, so you pronounce it slave, but the E wasn't there. It was the British who added the E to Slav to designate Slav for African people.
Mm.
Very cunning and clever, wasn't it?
Very, very,
Because
very, very.
before that, slavery, and because they had, a number of different terms for people in bondage and as chattel among their own people before they even came here, right? And so slavery was punishment for crimes, and the punishment in most cases was called transportation. Transportation to where? Here. They exiled criminals, thugs, the riffraff, the low class. That's how they got here. They got to Australia. They got to New Zealand for crimes they committed.
Mm-hmm,
Or
mm-hmm.
they were just worthless people, useless eaters. To them, the upper class British considered their own blood because they were of a lower class. That's why class is so prevalent in the UK today. And so they've exported a version of that here based on skin color. So anything that pertains to us is terrible, is horrible. White people need health care, particularly in rural areas. But they don't want to have health care if it means Black people are going to be healthy too. So they will fall for the okie doke and support representatives, who, wave flags about, oh, you don't want to have your baby an anti-racist baby,
Mm.
right? That kind of thing. And so that's what I'm saying. We have to let go of what I call the slave self model, which we're running unconsciously in our heads, in our spirits, that we still think we've learned to see ourselves as unworthy human beings.
Mm.
And remember, the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, Roger Taney, said in his Dred Scott decision, the Negroes are beings of an inferior order. They not just 3/5 of a human, they are beings of an inferior order. And that ruling has not been overturned or amended as of today. Yes, it's been superseded by the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. Yes, Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, removed the bust of Roger Taney last year. But his words live on in the hearts of many today. We saw that at the hearing, at the Supreme Court hearing this week. So until we let go of the slave self model, we can never be free. No one will never respect us based on who we are. And we're a miracle people to have survived this for this long. We got to give ourselves credit, because a lot of people didn't make it. In the Caribbean islands, they didn't make it. In South America, what's called South America, they didn't make it. In North America, Canada, they didn't make it. They're gone. The Tasmanian people are gone. They're extinct. So we got to give ourselves credit. We're a miracle people to be here. But we've learned some maladaptive ways.
Absolutely.
Maladaptive behaviors. And we have to identify them and learn some new active, proactive behaviors. And we do this, but it has to be scaled. But thanks to, the media, a lot of disinformation out here. And, one of the biggest things happening now, because we're in the Final Four season, I don't know if it's happening in Maryland, but there's been a plethora of sports betting advertisements. In Illinois, bet on sports. Some basketball players are being used for corporate purposes to get people to bet on sports games, to extract more money out of people, to distract them away from their suffering and pain, rather than finding a way to deal with it. And so we're under assault. My friend and colleague, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, told us over and over again, we're at war, people.
Yes. And Dr. Hunter, a lot of us don't realize that. And so that's why I wanted to move into my next question about the brain fog, because the title of your book, and I'm looking at your bio, right? You said, "We were never slaves, seeing through the brain fog of invisible violence." And so I wanted to ask you, what is brain fog, and what is the brain fog of invisible violence?
Okay, there's two ideas.
All right.
First off, the notion of invisible violence comes from my friend and colleague, mentor, Dr. Asa Hilliard. He wrote in the introduction to what's his name's book? Well, I'm blanking on his name. The Miseducation of the Negro. He talked about the notion of invisible violence.
Carter G. Woodson.
Right, Carter G. Woodson's. And invisible violence is the trauma that being under oppression and slavery does to a people. But we don't see it. It's never termed as violence. When we think of violence, we think of physical violence, or maybe verbal abuse or emotional abuse. But there's violence in policy, Dr. Maat.
Come on. That's right.
There's violence in not having access to healthy, fresh food. That's a form of violence. There's violence in discrimination in employment. There's violence when you get fired and you didn't do nothing, right? There's a myriad of forms of invisible violence, but it takes its toll on the mental health of the people who are inflicted by it. In this case, African descended people in the Americas, at least in the United States and Canada. And so when we talk about brain fog, there's a ton of books on brain fog, right? What is brain fog? That is a sense of confusion, a sense of not knowing what to do, that your thoughts aren't clear and you don't know why. People were locked down, for a year and a half in their abodes of anxiety, right? Didn't and couldn't do anything. They couldn't go out. And so the problem that I have with all the definitions of brain fog is that they make it as an individual thing. It's something that happens to an individual and it's their fault, right? But they don't look at the relationships the individual has with their family, with the job that they have, with their religious institution, with their friends and co-workers. Brain fog, in my estimation, is something that is relational, right? And so if you're not doing anything to deal with the relationships that you have, that's one of my criticisms of the whole mindfulness movement. I think it's very important that we do meditate, and I do, but that's not the answer for social problems, because someone still has their foot on our necks.
Come on.
Right. So what are we going to do to get the foot off our necks? And that requires something larger than just sitting and, meditating and thinking positive thoughts or going to church and praying. We can't pray away the foot off our necks. That hasn't happened. Now it's getting worse because the foot is now algorithms, right? That our physicality is now encoded in a computer code. So that's another form of invisible violence. And there was a Netflix movie called Coded Bias that folks could check out, that two sisters did, about how algorithms coded by mainly overwhelmingly white men code for certain biases against people of color, particularly Black people, African people. So the whole notion of brain fog, I had to come up with a metaphor that I could reach people, because, parts of the book is, somewhat technical, because I do talk about the brain and its functions and its different areas and things like that. People may know about dopamine, the reward neurotransmitter that, causes people to constantly seek behavior that they'll be rewarded for. That's one of the things about cocaine and opiate addiction, is that it triggers those dopamine receptors. And so you're always wanting more, more, more. You can't get enough. And then you have oxytocin, what some people call the cuddle hormone, that's secreted particularly in high concentrations in breastfeeding mothers. And so that facilitates that bond of empathy between the mother and her baby, oxytocin. But it's more complicated than that, particularly when we start looking at in-group and out-group behavior. And I talk about all of this, but I hope that gives you some sense of brain fog and why. I mean, if someone just does do a search, and I would say use the search engine Start Page or DuckDuckGo rather than Google, at least first, because Google tracks you.
Yes.
Right. And so that's why you see advertisements pop up in your feed, for this or that. You say, well, I didn't look for that. That's because they sell your search queries. But the search engine startpage.com and DuckDuckGo, that's two, they don't do that.
So Doc, let me ask you a question. When you put it together, right? So you define what brain fog is, and you define what you meant by, invisible violence. So when you put it all together, the brain fog of invisible violence, could you kind of just lay that definition out for me?
Okay, the point is that I have 5 strategies in this book to lift the brain fog of invisible violence. The first one The first one is knowing thyself.
Come on. Come
Right?
on.
We have to know ourselves. And so I ask the reader 5 questions, right? Who am I? What am I? Where did I come from? When did I come from? Right? And who's asking? The most important question is the last one. Who is doing the asking, trying to answer the questions? And the thing about it is that our religious institutions have packaged answers for us for those questions. And so we don't have to think about those answers. But if you practice any meditation discipline, no matter what it is, they want to engage you to find the answers to those questions yourself. And then check to see if your answers agree with the answers that you've learned from whatever faith system that you're in. The second thing is how many, I'm sure most of your viewers have seen the Matrix films.
Yes. And you and I talked about that when I called you. And remember,
Right.
you said that the Matrix, you said it wasn't far off in terms of how we think, how the brain works. But go ahead, finish your thought, Doc.
Right. Well, the premise of the Matrix films is that Neo was a computer simulation, right? And so he was trying to figure out what was the Matrix. And the Matrix was a computer simulation with which he was part of. But here's the thing. Watch this now. Folks say, oh, I don't believe that. There's no such thing as a simulation. Well, I met an Australian philosopher and neuroscientist back at a Science of Consciousness conference in 2004. His name is David Chalmers, right? He's now at New York University. He has a book out today called Virtual Reality Plus. And then he wrote a very controversial piece called The Zombie Philosophy, in that many of us have zombies running through our brains, through our consciousness. But it was really a philosophical experiment to get his cohorts to see that the mind is not a thing. It's a process. I want y'all to get this now.
Come on.
The mind is not a thing. It's a process. It's something that's happening over and over again. And that's something quite different from what we've learned, because we learned the mind is a thing. The brain is part. The mind comes from the brain. Well, that's only partially true, because our ancestors in Kemet had worked that out, 3,000 years ago, that the mind and the brain are flip sides of the same thing, right? But here's the thing. Some Italian neurophysiologists in 1997 accidentally discovered what they went on to name as mirror neurons.
Come on, Dr. Newt used to talk about it. She used to talk about mirror neurons.
We talked about that all the time. And mirror neurons are specific groups of cells in different parts of the brain that make copies, right, of the movements that we see other people make. You've heard of the whole notion of mental rehearsal.
Come on, teach.
That I may not be able to be like Tiger Woods in golf or the Williams sisters, but if I study their tapes enough, well, then I can take in the movements that they do to execute what they do on the tennis court or the golf course or on the basketball court.
That's observational learning, right, Dr.
Right.
Hudson? Yeah,
Right. But you are engaging these mirror neurons, right, to create a model. The question is, where do the people come from we see in our dreams when we're asleep? When everything is shut down, right? Our visual system is shut down. Our hearing system is shut down. We're not getting any input from those senses, but we see people in the dreams. Where do they come from? They come from the simulations of people that we've been engaged with throughout our lives. And now there's the technology where this can be measured and studied. So our brains, Dr. Maat, has to build a model of the world starting in the womb. When a mother feels her baby's hands touching the inside of her stomach, the brain is beginning to develop a sense of boundary and self right in the womb. And then gradually over time, it extends outward at birth. And so it has to make representations of everything in its environment. And other animals do this too. It's not just human beings. But the point I'm getting at is that our brain, yours and mine, your viewers, makes models of the world. But it also makes models of itself, interacting with the world. You following me?
Yes, this is deep. Family, I don't know about you right now, but I'm over here just, this is deep. Dr. Hunter is really dropping some stuff on us, family. Share this discussion, share this show. This stuff is deep. So, Doc, you just said that our brain makes models of the world, but then our brain also makes models of it interacting with the world. Am I
Right.
am I with you?
And that includes other people. So we have models of other people within ourselves. And we never are interacting with someone directly, except during intimate moments when you're actually physically touching someone, right? That's the only time we have direct connections with another person. But otherwise, we're interacting with the models that we have accumulated and developed over time of other people, and vice versa. They're interacting with models of us that they have. And so for European people, hypopigmented people, i.e., people who classify themselves as white, as Dr. Welsing said, what is their model of African people? What is their model of African people, of Black people? Slaves. So whenever they see us, what do they see? They see someone who's in bondage, who deserves to be in bondage. That's their model. That's their world model that they're running every single day. So until we get rid of that model, we'll never be free. Because in their heads, we're not human. Does that make sense?
Doc, it makes perfect sense, but I'm over here just blown. I'm always like I know you kind of moved on, but my brain is going back to when you said when we're interacting with people, we're interacting with models of them. You said the only time we're really interacting with them is if it's in an intimate setting, like if we're being intimate and we're touching. You said other than that, it's a model. And just you said, and they're operating with a model of us.
Right, a story. So you have the story that we tell ourselves about ourselves to ourselves. That story is we're victims, we're slaves, we're sons and daughters, grandsons, descendants of slaves. That's one of my biggest problems with the ADOS people, you know, because they ignorantly dislocate us from our humanity with the notion of American descendants of slavery. No, we're human beings who are descendants of an international system of, wealth extraction. That's who we are here. And so you have the story that we tell ourselves about other people, who they were. We will use lots of disparaging terms to talk about hypopigmented people, i.e., white people. They're evil and so forth and so on. There's an article that your viewers can check out about the Yamnaya people. Ever heard of them?
No.
In Central Europe, these are the most violent, or were the most violent genocidal people ever. They wiped out lots of civilizations in Europe. The Yamnaya people, y'all can look it up, right? The story of the most murderous people of all time revealed in ancient DNA. And so elements of that spirit is still present today. And so we have to get our story straight. That's why Dr. King was so important about we getting our story straight. That we have models of the thoughts of other people who don't like us running in our heads. And so when we get around them, we change, we become subservient, we submit, we don't speak up, we don't be ourselves because we don't want to offend them, because we want to be what they think that we're not, that we're human beings. But in their model of us, we're not human beings or less than human beings.
Doc, I want to go back to the 5 points you were making. So you had made like you said 5 main points of the book. And the first point was you said, know thyself. The second point, you said you were asking a series of questions to the reader. And then you mentioned you were going into the third point, but we kind of got off track because we started talking about the matrix. But what was the third point, Doc?
Well, this is the 5 strategies, I call them.
Okay.
Number 1 is breaking out the brain fog of invisible violence. Number 2 is overcoming the language of oppression. Strategy number 3 is breaking out of bamboozlement. Spike Lee did that movie Bamboozled. Y'all remember that?
Yes.
Right? 4 is exiting the trauma zone. Dr. Newton talked about we're trapped in the drama of the trauma, for 500 years. And strategy 5 is taking the black pill, not the red or the blue pill, the black pill, because that's the only way we can show up and show our power, as Rochelle Farrell, the vocalist Rochelle Farrell, said in the concert here in Chicago. So those are my 5 strategies.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't want to go off. I didn't want to go off. I wanted to make sure they understood your strategies.
That's how we can heal the harm that we've experienced. And then as we heal our harm, other folks can see our example and heal their harm. But we have to heal our harm first. We can't save the world. There's some people, as our dearly beloved sister, Harriet Tubman said, they got to be left behind. They got to be left behind. They're too far gone. And so we can't expend energy trying to convince them of a truth that's so obvious. Now, some say, well, Hunter, you're talking metaphors and this and that. I said, well, I'm trying to communicate, but everything that I'm saying is backed up by the clinical work of my dear sister, Dr. Patricia Newton, in science. So this is not something I'm making up. No, it's not. I've been working on this book now since 2010, right? and it's coming to an end. I'm bringing closure to it this year. So I'm really grateful. I've had, some experiences or offers that life has given me that's been setbacks.
No, it's all good, Doc. It's all
Right.
good, Doc. Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we can do, and I encourage people after my mother made her transition, um, the hospital that she was going to for treatment for her Parkinson's disease, they had a number of programs for the caregivers, right? And one of the programs which I participated in was improv. And so I did 18 months of improv classes at the Second City here in Chicago. If anyone doesn't know anything about the Second City, but you look at Saturday Night Live or the Steve Colbert Show, they're all graduates from the Second City. And one of the things about improv is that it the exercises take you out of the present moment and bring you into a space where you can engage other parts of yourself that's running in the background or obscure. And so it allows you to get in touch with yourself. And so that's one of the things that I suggest in the last chapter on healing the harm is doing a self-love check.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to check on how much do we love ourselves, because we don't really love ourselves at the level that we need to in order to continue to survive and to thrive.
Okay. Well, Doc, let me ask you.
Someone said that we should stop saying white supremacy. Absolutely. Dr. Newton and I both hate that term.
White supremacy.
Now watch this, when you say white supremacy, you invoke subconsciously the corollary to that semantically, which is what? Black inferiority. Whether or not you believe in white supremacy or not, it doesn't matter. But your brain sees a network of associations between white and black, inferior and supreme. And what we've learned is that white is supreme, black is inferior. So you don't have to believe that. But subconsciously, that's what's taking place within us. And so we have to be very careful of the language we use to communicate with ourselves and to others.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And even one of our elders, Baba Mwalimu Barudi, expressed that he doesn't like the term white supremacy either. He said he calls it they are inspiring to that, but he said it's nothing supreme about these people. And he said they're aspiring to be supreme, and they're not. And so he said he doesn't like the term either. All right.
So you can say, just quickly, you can say white exceptionalism, that they want to see themselves as exceptional. Well, they do have exceptional power, military power. That's a fact. Or white hegemony, but never say white supremacy.
Right. No, that makes sense, Doc. Like it makes complete sense. So, Doc, we've been on for almost an hour, and that hour flew. And I knew that it would, because when you and I are on the telephone together, I mean, we go. When you and I, when we finally talk, we may not talk for months. And then when I call you up, Doc, we get on the phone and we talk for an hour or two. So I knew that this time would fly. But Doc, I mean, people in the chat, they keep talking about when is his book coming out? When is his book coming out? So you said that your book should be ready winter of 2022. So this winter, your book should be available.
Yeah, I'll let you know in plenty of time.
All right. And so, Doc, I always do this when powerful guests come on. I drop a bomb for them. So I got to drop a bomb for you.
Okay.
Fire! 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 Fire!
So, Doc, do you have any closing words for the listening audience?
My closing words is thank you very much for inviting me. Earlier today, I gave a talk on Ma'at, believe it or not, on the history of Ma'at and what in Kemet. So thank you very much for inviting me, and I look forward to coming back. And, I'll be
Yes.
happy to talk about other aspects of the book.
Absolutely. We can talk about other aspects of the book, and I would love to hear your lecture, your discussion on the history of Ma'at. That would be hot. So we could
Okay.
delve into that, and we can talk about different aspects of your book. I know that when you get your book, you might as well put up about 10 or 20 copies for me, because I'll grab about 10 or 20 copies from you when you first
Okay.
release your book, Doc. So just let me know. Shoot me a text. Shoot
Oh,
me a
yeah.
text and let me know so that I can. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And people, I'm trying to show you the comments, Doc. People enjoyed the discussion. They said, I love this discussion. You have wonderful show. They said, I love Dr. Adams. Sister Amina, she said, can't wait for Dr. Adams' book of wisdom. Sister Queen Cheetah, peace to you, beloved. She said, this was awesome. Thank you, Dr. Maat, and thank you, Dr. Adams. Sister Kathleen, she said, thank you. So I'm just trying to go through and show you their comments so you
Good.
can see them. Brother Shango, he said, awesome show. And then you have William Sharp. This brother said, wow, this was really, really good. Sister Tiffany gave you the fire emojis.
Fires.
Yeah, gave you the fire emojis. Peace to a beautiful mind. She said, a beautiful mind. I know she will be in the building tomorrow at 7:00. She said,
Okay.
peace and love, everyone. I hope everyone enjoyed the rest of their weekend. Ashe. So people are showering you, Doc, with, giving you your flowers while you can smell them, right? Jakim, peace to the warrior. He said, thanks for the presentations, Docs. You have the red, black, and green. And someone said, I want this to continue. And then people are now commenting. T said, love the knowledge and wisdom and understanding. And so, Doc, again, thank you so much for coming on my platform. Family. Oh, did you do your closing words, Doc? Did you give your closing words?
Did I give my closing words?
Yeah, I don't think you gave any closing words, did you?
I thought I did. I thought I said thank you for inviting me.
No, I said, did you have any closing words for the listening audience? Did we get to that?
Are you still on? Are you still live?
Yeah, I'm still live. Did you want to say something to the listening audience? Yeah, before we closed.
Oh, I thought this was our conversation. No, my closing words is I thank the audience for their attention and time, because you had choices. You could have been doing something else. And so thank you very much for spending an hour with us. So I look forward in coming back again and elaborating on some of the ideas that, like we didn't talk about the George Floyd effect. That's something that I have a whole chapter in the book on. And the question is, what was it that 26 million people, overwhelmingly white, for the summer of 2020, recognized George Floyd as a human being?
Doc, save it. Doc, save it.
Had 4,400 protests worldwide. 26 million people, the largest political protests recorded. I got swept up in one here in Chicago. And I was trying to understand what was it? And so in the book, I give an answer, a neuroscience answer as to what happened to those people.
Doc, that's the next show. The George Floyd effect. That's the title of the next show. And we're going to unpack that. Because you're right. What was it? And a part of that, I'm thinking that the propaganda
they found their humanity because they recognize his. And so that squelched, to use an engineering term, it made their racism temporarily disappear because they recognize his humanity. 26 million people.
Worldwide.
60 days. For 60 days. And no one has said nothing about it. No one has offered a reason as to explain that or explain why 74 million people doubled down on their hatred for African people in this country.
Well, Doc, that's going to be the next show. It'll just be called the George Floyd Effect, and we will unpack what happened. So, Doc, you got to come back.
Okay.
And Doc, I know you, so I'm a bug you because I know you.
Okay.
Say, I don't think I can. I don't think I got to catch you. So I'll be bugging you, Doc, just to set a date, and put it on your calendar for you to come back and we unpack that.
Okay.
And so, yep, someone said finally, Sister Amina said finally, humanity was viewed and related to George Floyd's humanity. She said, bingo.
Because at the
Dr.
beginning,
Adams.
His humanity was suspect, right? Because we've seen the same story happen before. But something happened. Something happened to those 26 million people internally where they got in touch with their fundamental humanity. I don't know what's happening with them today.
Right. The people that were in the protests.
Right.
All right.
But anyway, so thank you again and thank the viewers. Look forward in coming back.
Thank you, Doc, for taking time out to be here. Family, join me back here tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Read Book Club. We're going to be discussing Chapter 7 of The Color of Money by Mercer, and I probably always butcher her name, Baradaran. And so, family, if you don't have the book, and even if you haven't read the chapter, please make sure that you tune in because you will learn something. So I'll be live tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Peace and Black Power.
Let's combat and fight back with maltraction. The war of the minds, they want control of the masses. And Common Core, they dumb us down in the classes. Without knowledge, we can't gain access. Build with the elders, take notes and write classes. We keep whining on the block, how it's gonna stop? Let's start supporting our own, make their supply drop. We buy stocks, then we buy blocks. Cause we know the truth and we tuned in to Dr. Maat.